How do you burn through $70 million? Just ask MC Hammer. How do you go from a $40 million net worth to borrowing money just to buy your kids Burger King? T-Pain knows that story all too well. In hip-hop, the journey to fame is legendary, but the crash from the top can be just as dramatic. For every tale of mansions, cars, and platinum records, there's another of foreclosures, repossessions, and million-dollar debts. These are 15 rappers who went broke. At number 15, we have Earl DMX Simmons. Earl DMX Simmons was one of the biggest rap stars in the world. His raw, aggressive sound and unmatched energy made him a household name in the late 90s and early 2000s. He sold over 75 million records worldwide, and at his peak, he was headlining tours, starring in Hollywood films, and earning millions every year. On the surface, he had it all, but behind the music and fame, his financial life was spiraling out of control. DMX's problems with money didn't come from some carefully planned scheme. They came from a mix of distrust in the system, overwhelming personal obligations, and a lifestyle that always demanded cash. Between 2010 and 2015, he pulled in more than $2.3 million in income, but instead of paying taxes, he avoided more than $1.7 million. He didn't try to set up offshore accounts or shell companies like some do. Instead, he had his earnings deposited into the accounts of his managers and friends. They would then withdraw the money as cash or pay his bills directly. It was a crude system, but it kept money in his pocket and off the books, at least for a while. The biggest weight on DMX's shoulders, though, was his child support debt. He fathered 15 children with 9 different women, and the financial pressure was staggering. By 2013, he owed over $1.24 million in unpaid child support. In one case, he even landed in jail after falling behind by $400,000. With so many people depending on him and so many bills piling up, he relied on cash as a way to stay afloat, which only made his situation with the IRS worse. Eventually, the government caught up with him. In 2017, he was indicted on 14 counts of tax fraud. A year later, he was sentenced to a year in prison and ordered to pay back $2.29 million. His bankruptcy filings painted an even darker picture. In one, he admitted to having just $50,000 in assets against debts that could have reached $10 million. By the time he passed away in 2021, DMX's net worth was estimated at negative $1 million. For someone who once stood at the very top of the rap game, it was a tragic fall that showed just how quickly fame and fortune can crumble. Moving on to number 14, we have Ja Rule. Ja Rule's story takes a slightly different turn, but the result was the same. Millions earned and millions lost. At the height of his career in the early 2000s, Ja Rule was everywhere. His songs dominated the radio, he was selling out arenas, and his collaborations with artists like Ashanti and Jennifer Lopez turned him into one of the biggest names in the industry. But while the hits were rolling in, the tax bills were piling up. Between 2004 and 2006, he made more than $3 million and never paid taxes on it. The IRS eventually came calling, and he was sentenced to 28 months in prison. He was also ordered to pay back $1.1 million, but that wasn't the end of it. Years later, in 2019, the IRS claimed he owed another $2 million in back taxes. That pattern of financial mismanagement spilled into one of the most embarrassing chapters of his career, the infamous Fyre Festival. In 2017, Ja Rule became the celebrity face of what was promised to be a luxury music festival in the Bahamas. The event was advertised as the ultimate VIP experience, complete with luxury villas, gourmet food, and a star-studded lineup. Thousands of fans paid thousands of dollars for tickets, expecting paradise. What they got instead was chaos. Half-built tents, cheese sandwiches in styrofoam boxes, no infrastructure, and not a single music act. The backlash was massive. Investors, vendors, and ticket holders lost millions, and lawsuits piled up. One class action lawsuit alone sought $100 million in damages. While Ja Rule was eventually cleared of wrongdoing in court, his association with the disaster destroyed his reputation. It also revealed a deeper pattern. The same carelessness that led him to ignore millions in tax bills was the same lack of attention to detail that allowed the Fyre Festival to blow up in his face. Even though he wasn't convicted in the Fyre mess, the damage was already done. His financial troubles and public embarrassment cemented his name as one of the rappers whose wealth and reputation collapsed almost overnight. Lauryn Hill is next on the list. Lauryn Hill's story stands out in the world of rappers who went broke, because unlike most, her downfall wasn't blamed on bad accountants, reckless spending, or poor judgment. For her, it was something much deeper. After dominating the late 90 seconds with the miseducation of Lauryn Hill and cementing herself as one of the greatest voices of her generation, Lauryn walked away from the spotlight. At the time, she said it was to protect herself and her family. Stepping back from the music industry she felt had become toxic. What no one knew was that her decision would also lead to a financial disaster. Between 2005 and 2009, she made over $2.3 million, but she refused to file taxes on any of it. This wasn't by accident. When she eventually pleaded guilty in court, Lauryn explained that she had withdrawn from society on purpose. On her blog, she described her refusal to pay taxes as a form of protest against what she saw as a corrupt and dangerous system. She argued that she was acting out of survival, writing about her right to resist a system she believed was working against her and her family. But no matter how principled her stance might have been, the law didn't care about her reasoning. She managed to pay back over $900,000 before sentencing, yet it still wasn't enough. In 2013, Lauryn Hill was sentenced to 3 months in federal prison, followed by another 3 months of home confinement. For fans who saw her as untouchable, it was a shocking reminder that even the most gifted artists could lose it all in an instant. Her case didn't look like typical tax evasion. Instead, it became this strange mix of politics, personal belief, and financial collapse. Still, the result was the same. One of the most iconic voices in hip-hop and soul found herself broke and behind bars. Next up at number 12, it's Nelly. Nelly's story hit differently because his career had been built on unstoppable commercial success. At one point, he was one of the most bankable rappers in the world. He sold more than 21 million albums in the United States alone, making him one of the best-selling rappers in history. With chart-topping hits like Hot and Hair and Dilemma, he wasn't just making music, he was printing money. But even a run like his wasn't enough to protect him when the IRS came knocking. In 2016, news broke that Nelly owed the government a massive $2.4 million in back taxes. On top of that, Missouri state officials revealed he also owed nearly $150,000 in state taxes. The debt was so serious that the IRS filed a federal tax lien, which gave them the right to seize his property and assets if he didn't pay up. Suddenly, one of the most successful rappers of his era was staring at financial ruin. What happened next was both heartwarming and ironic. Fans launched the viral number Save Nelly campaign, urging people to stream Hot and Hair non-stop on Spotify to help generate enough royalties to pay off his debt. For a short while, it actually worked. His streaming numbers shot up, and the song gained a whole new life more than a decade after its release. But there was a cruel twist. Streaming platforms like Spotify pay artists fractions of a cent per play, roughly $0.003 to $0.005. That meant fans would have needed to stream Hot and Hair more than 287 million times just to cover his federal debt. The campaign, while heartfelt, was never going to be enough. It was a symbolic act of love from fans, but it also exposed how broken the modern music economy is, where millions of streams can still leave an artist broke. In 11th place, we have Fat Joe. Fat Joe's fall into financial trouble is another painful reminder of how even seasoned rappers can end up trapped when they trust the wrong people with their money. The Bronx legend, known for hits like Lean Back and What's Love, earned millions during his career. But between 2007 and 2010, he failed to file taxes on more than $3.3 million in income. By the time the IRS finished its calculations, the government said he owed $718,038 in back taxes. When he was charged, Fat Joe explained that the problem wasn't reckless spending, but bad advice. He blamed a new accountant he had hired, saying that for 15 years, his previous financial team had handled everything correctly, but things went wrong when he switched. While that may have been true, the courts didn't care. The law is very clear. No matter who handles your money, the responsibility for paying taxes always falls on you. In December 2012, Fat Joe pleaded guilty to tax evasion. He was sentenced to 4 months in federal prison, fined $15,000, and given 1 year of supervised release. For a rapper who had built his reputation on being larger than life, it was a humbling experience. His case highlighted a reality that many artists face. They may be geniuses with music, but when it comes to finance, they often leave everything in the hands of professionals. And if those professionals fail, the artist is the one who ends up paying the price. Cracking the top 10 at number 10 is MC Hammer. In the early 1990 seconds, Hammer was unstoppable. His hit You Can't Touch This wasn't just a song. It was a global anthem that turned him into one of the biggest stars on the planet. At his peak, his fortune was estimated at $70 million, an almost unbelievable amount for a rapper at that time. But with all that money came spending on a scale that shocked everyone. Hammer bought a $12 million estate in Fremont, California, and then poured another $30 million into transforming it into his dream palace. It had gold-plated gates with the words, "Hammer Time," a bowling alley, a 17-car garage, and 2 swimming pools. He owned 17 luxury cars, a private jet, 2 helicopters, and even 21 thoroughbred racehorses, some worth over $1 million each. But the real cost wasn't the toys, it was the people. Hammer kept more than 200 friends, family members, and staff on his payroll, which drained over $500,000 every single month. He wasn't just spending to show off. He wanted to create an empire where everyone around him could benefit. It was loyalty on a massive scale, but it came at a devastating price. When the hits stopped selling like before, that empire began to crumble. By 1996, Hammer was drowning in debt. He filed for bankruptcy, listing $13.7 million in debt against only $9.6 million in assets. For a man who once seemed larger than life, the collapse was brutal. His downfall showed the world how quickly fortune can vanish when success is built on one stream of income and a lifestyle too expensive to maintain. Claiming the 9th position is Scott Storch. Scott Storch's downfall is a different kind of tragedy, one fueled by fame, fortune, and addiction. In the 2000s, he was the hitmaker behind some of the biggest records in music, working with artists like 50 Cent, Beyoncé, and Justin Timberlake. He built a fortune worth around $70 million, but instead of securing his future, the money became fuel for his self-destruction. Storch later admitted that he was the most dangerous kind of addict because he had millions of dollars in the bank and nothing stopping him from feeding his habit. The numbers are staggering. In just 6 months, he blew through $30 million, much of it on drugs and wild spending. He bought a $20 million yacht, a private jet, and nearly 20 exotic cars, including one of the first Bugatti Veyrons ever sold. He showered girlfriends with expensive gifts and lived a lifestyle that cost more than $1 million every month. He even had someone on his staff whose only job was to roll his blunts. By the time reality caught up, the money was gone. In 2015, Storch filed for bankruptcy, claiming he had only $3,600 in assets. That included a watch, $500 worth of clothes, and just $100 in cash. For a man who once shaped the sound of an entire era, it was a stunning fall from grace. His story remains one of the most shocking examples of how quickly a fortune can disappear when reckless spending take control. T-Pain is another rapper who went broke. T-Pain's collapse hits even harder because it came from a mix of bad investments and blind trust. Known as the king of autotune, he changed the sound of hip-hop and R&B, stacking up hits and at one point holding a net worth of around $40 million. But the money didn't last. In fact, it got so bad that he once admitted he had to borrow money just to buy Burger King for his kids. His spending habits revealed just how out of touch he was with reality. He owned 36 cars, including a Bugatti Veyron worth $1.2 million. When a radiator failed, it cost $90,000 to repair. Just 5 months after buying it, he sold the car at a loss of $400,000. For him, these weren't investments. They were toys, and the losses added up fast. Real estate was supposed to be a safety net, but it only dragged him down further. Guided by what he would later call an overly optimistic manager, T-Pain poured millions into properties he thought would grow in value. Instead, they turned out to be what he described as crack houses, worthless buildings that he couldn't sell. On top of all that, he admitted he never checked his own accounts. He trusted his team to handle everything, and they failed him. When the dust settled, the fortune was gone. T-Pain went from living like a superstar to being completely broke, his story proving how quickly money can disappear when flashy spending replaces smart investing and blind trust replaces oversight. At number 7, we have Beanie Sigel. At one point, the former Roc-A-Fella star was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison after failing to pay more than $728,000 in taxes on over $2.2 million of income. He earned between $199,900 and $2,005. To make matters worse, during that stretch of success when his career was at its peak, he only paid $10,000 in taxes. That tiny fraction compared to what he owed showed just how far behind he had fallen, but Beanie's tax mess was only one piece of the puzzle. His run-ins with the law were frequent and serious, ranging from attempted murder to gun and charges, even assault. In many ways, his unpaid taxes reflected the same rebellious streak that fueled his constant battles with authority. The IRS just became another opponent in a long list of fights. Instead of focusing on his finances during his prime years, Seigel lived on the edge, clashing with the system until everything caught up with him. For a rapper who once had money and fame within reach, those choices left him broke and behind bars. Method Man is number 6 on the list. Method Man's story, though, played out very differently. The Wu-Tang legend also landed in hot water with the tax authorities, but unlike Beanie, his downfall didn't spiral into total collapse. In 2009, he was arrested for failing to pay around $33,000 in New York state income taxes covering the years 2004 through 2007. With penalties and interest added, the debt ballooned to $106,000. That could have been disastrous, but Method Man managed to handle it in a way that showed just how much difference timing and resources can make. In court, instead of dragging things out, he admitted his mistake and pulled out a check for the remaining $40,000 right there on the spot. That moment saved him from prison time and gave him a conditional discharge, meaning the case would disappear from his record if he kept himself clean. It wasn't just about paying the money, though. It proved he still had the means to make things right, something many rappers in similar situations could only dream of. His story is a reminder that one financial slip doesn't always have to turn into a full-on crash if you act quickly. Down at number 5, we have Young Buck. For Young Buck, the fall from fame to financial ruin was nothing short of brutal. Once a rising star with G-Unit, he found himself battling not only the IRS but also his own label. His nightmare started in August 2010 when federal agents stormed his Nashville home. It wasn't just the recording equipment or jewelry they took away. They even hauled off furniture and his children's PlayStation consoles. The reason? He owed the government more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes, and the raid made sure he had nothing left to hide behind. But that wasn't the end of it. Forced into Chapter 13 bankruptcy, Young Buck's biggest problem wasn't just the IRS. It was his broken relationship with 50 Cent and G-Unit Records. He claimed his contract with the label stopped him from recording new music to make money, while the label argued he owed them $10 million. It was a vicious cycle. He couldn't work to pay his debts, yet the debts kept growing because of the contract. To make matters worse, 50 Cent and the label filed claims in his bankruptcy case, trying to take ownership of his master recordings and even the rights to the name Young Buck. It stopped being a fight about money and turned into a battle for his very identity as an artist. What destroyed him wasn't reckless spending, but a contract so toxic that it left him trapped and stripped of everything he had built. Exhibit is number 4. Exhibit's story shows how quickly fame can turn into financial disaster when you don't have ownership of your success. At his peak, he was more than a rapper. As the charismatic host of MTV's hit show Pimp My Ride, Exhibit became a household name, cashing in nearly $500,000 in 2007 alone. But when the show was suddenly canceled that same year, his earnings crashed. By 2008, he was down to just $67,510, and that sharp drop left him drowning in debt. With the bills piling up, he owed almost $1 million in back taxes and had to file for bankruptcy twice, once in 2009 and again in 2010. Neither filing saved him, as both were dismissed. Years later, Exhibit revealed that the real problem wasn't just the tax debt, but how the companies behind Pimp My Ride allegedly cut him out of the profits. He accused Viacom CBS of editing his music out of reruns so they wouldn't have to pay him royalties and even removing his name and image from merchandise to avoid paying him a fair share. Despite being the face of one of MTV's most iconic shows, he claimed he was treated like a hired hand instead of a partner. His downfall wasn't about overspending on a flashy lifestyle. It was about a bad deal that left him out of the fortune his work helped create. Taking the 3rd spot on our list is Nas. Nas is one of hip-hop's most respected lyricists, a rapper whose words shape generations. But even legends are not immune to money problems. For Nas, financial troubles piled up at the worst possible time. In 2011, it was revealed that the IRS had slapped him with a tax lien of more than $46 million, covering unpaid taxes from 2006 to 2010. This was during a period when CD sales were collapsing and streaming hadn't yet become a reliable way for artists to make money. Nas was still dropping classic albums, but his income wasn't flowing like it had in the 90 seconds. Then came his divorce from singer Kellis, which forced him to pay heavy child and spousal support. Just a year before news of the tax lien broke, his 2-bedroom Georgia home went into foreclosure. He had bought it for $585,000 in 2004, but after defaulting on payments, the bank sold it off for just $348,500. It took Nas years to climb out of the hole, and in 2017, he finally settled the debt, making a final payment of $3.5 million. It was a painful reminder that being relevant in music doesn't always guarantee financial stability, even for a rapper with a legacy as untouchable as his. Runner-up at number 2, we've got Trick Daddy. Trick Daddy's story is one of constant struggle with money, a cycle that never seemed to end. The Miami rapper was never shy about living large, but behind the scenes, his finances were crumbling. In 2010, his suburban Miami home was foreclosed on, a sign of the storm ahead. The IRS had already been after him for years, with tax liens totaling more than $157,000 for unpaid taxes stretching from 2002 to 2009. Things only got worse. By 2019, Trick Daddy's situation reached rock bottom when he filed for bankruptcy again, and the numbers showed just how bad it was. He listed more than $800,000 in debt, including $435,000 on his mortgage, $57,000 in back child support, and $290,000 owed to the IRS. Even worse, he admitted in the filing that he had exactly $0 in his checking account. He has filed for bankruptcy at least 4 times, but none of them have fixed the core issue. He simply doesn't have enough steady income to cover the basics. Instead of being a fresh start, bankruptcy became a revolving door for him, trapping him in a cycle that still haunts his career. And finally, taking the number 1 spot, it's Rick Ross. Rick Ross built his empire on the image of being the boss, the untouchable kingpin who had more money, cars, and mansions than anyone could count. That's why when his financial problems came to light, fans were shocked. In 2016, the IRS revealed that Ross owed a staggering $5.7 million in unpaid taxes from 2012 to 2014. To make it worse, $4.6 million of that was just from 2012 alone. His team quickly blamed the mess on an incorrect filing by a former accountant, but the damage was already done. For someone who constantly flaunted wealth in his music and lifestyle, the reality painted a very different picture. Was he really as rich as he claimed? Or was it just smoke and mirrors fueled by debt and bad management? The incident forced people to question the entire flex culture in hip-hop. Behind the private jets, gold chains, and endless bottles, was the money really there, or was it just a fragile performance waiting to collapse? For Rick Ross, the tax bill was more than a financial problem. It was a crack in the image of the boss.